We are up to chapter 13. This is the reunion process. Remember, I am reading from the Primal Wound. Please go pick up your copy if you haven't. Support the author. I will be making commentary as I read. Okay, chapter 13 The Reunion Process. Reunions are very emotional. I have heard some birth mothers say that the reunion was perfect, that they have a wonderful relationship with their child, and I have held others as they cried and said that their child doesn't care and never phones or even writes. In any case, the birth mother, the adoptee, or the adoptive parents, it can be just as puzzling for the birth mother as the adoptive relationship is for the adoptive parents. Sometimes everything seems to be going fine, and then the birth mother doesn't hear from her child for months on end. She's puzzled, she's hurt, and because she's hurting, she sometimes reacts from her own hurt child by abandoning her child for the second time. I'm going to say this. I had a reunion. I will tell my story, but I don't reach out very often because I feel like maybe she should be the one reaching out. So maybe that's my fault, but it does feel very hurt from my end of this side where it doesn't feel ideal. Um, but I know I can reach out to her anytime, and I have. Just not often. Alright, anyway. Understanding the emotional climate of reunions. Many of the problems which adoptive parents face with their adopted child will crop up between the birth mother and adoptee. This includes the adoptee's problem of compliance and the false self, which many birth parents, as well as adoptive parents, fail to recognize. More easy to identify is the experience of rejection and abandonment, which some adoptees usually unconsciously act out with their birth parents, waiting for phone calls and letters from rediscovered, but the unresponsive children can be excruciating painful, as many birth mothers can verify. It may be that in neither the case of the perfect reunion nor the difficult reunion is the adoptee acting from his or her true feelings, but from a protective stance. One is being the perfect birth child, who doesn't want to risk losing mother again. And the other is the acting out birth child, who is testing the birth mother and wants her to know what it feels like to be abandoned. Does this sound at all familiar? It will to adoptive parents, because in many cases the birth and adoptive parents will experience similar responses from their children. This could and should serve to help foster understanding between them as they strive to relate to their children and to each other. I want to dwell on this idea a bit because I believe it to be important. Both mothers may experience their child as being reluctant to accept that relationship at face value. Remember that their first experience outside the womb was separation and loss. This often results in their being cautious in accepting the love and attention which the mother, whether biological or adoptive, wants to give. Distrusting the permanence of any relationship is one of the most predictable outcomes of that early separation and loss experience. The birth mother does not escape that distrust. In fact, because she was the original lost object, she is indeed suspect. If she left me once when I was a tiny baby, she can leave me again, as Gina put it. This was not very likely does wait. That this is not very likely does not do away with the feeling that it could happen. A similar feeling is experienced by the birth mother, who is often afraid that if she does this or that in her new relationship with her child, she will lose them again. The trauma of that loss for her sets up a reoccurring feeling of impending and terrifying loss. When so-called negative feelings come up in the new tentative relationship, she is terrified that she will lose the child again if she doesn't make things right, or she will get defensive and deny whatever it is that the adoptee is trying to convey to her but about their feelings. They then will feel hopeless and they will feel helpless about getting her to understand them and will continue to conform, wow, and it will either conform to what they perceive she wants him to do or be, or they will be distance themselves from her in a self-fulfilling prophecy. In either case, she's lost an opportunity to get to know the real person who is their child. What I would like to emphasize on both birth and adoptive parents is that even when their own inner child is being hurt in the relationship, she must act in the relationship as the mature adult in control of her actions. Notice that I didn't say in control of her feelings. She can experience her feelings but act maturely, in the manner which I have previously described. She can allow her hurt inner child to come out in a support group or therapy. I can't stress enough how important it is for someone to be mature in these exchanges, and that someone has to be the mother no matter how old the child is. In any good relationship, many emotions are felt and expressed, including love, hate, joy, rage, exultation, hostility, and sadness. If these feelings can be validated and accepted as true, even if they seem out of proportion in the present situation, if they can be tolerated by the birth mother, the adoptive mother, or the therapist, as the adoptee struggles to relate to them, instead of denied or defended against, a satisfactory adult relationship can emerge. When that has happened, then a more reciprocal exchange of expressions of feelings can take place. Then the two adults, the mother and the child, can begin to relate as peers and as friends before a mature relationship can occur. However, a long road must be traveled. It is very important to the healing process to understand that journey. So basically, so let me explain this in a nice way. There are therapists out there, and that is wonderful. However, very few are trauma or adoption trauma informed, which is very necessary because there is levels of complexity, like we hear from this book, but also adoptees are often finding that therapists, not being trauma informed, have a biased tendency because they don't know all those aspects and they don't know what adoption actually does, not only within trauma, but within the legal realms of harming the child. I will go into more of a video on the therapy aspect, but I'm just going to note, if you are looking for a therapist because you are an adoptee, a birth parent, an adoptive parent, I hate to say hopeful adoptive parent, but hopeful adoptive parent, because we know that that's still going to happen for now. Please keep in mind, seek an adoption trauma informed therapist. Okay, someone that can tell you the good and the bad, because it is not the happy-go-lucky situation you think it is, clearly from this book, but beyond that, always have that child focus. Alright, anywho, moving on. Regression. One of the reasons that the relationship between birth mother and child is so puzzling is that upon meeting, it is almost inevitable that the adoptee, no matter how old, regresses. There is a wish to go back to do it over, and to have that mother be again in the symbiotic relationship, which was severed upon relinquishment. The mother also wishes for this. She wants to be able to nurture her newborn, to hold and rock and comfort them, and finds it disconcerting that they are no longer a tiny being. One of the things which the birth mother might notice then is that her child wants to be available to them at all times, just as a newborn child would. Never mind that they have to go to work the next day. The child may want to talk to her long into the night. At the beginning, they may want to call her every day, at any time of the day or night, just to reconnect, just to be sure that she is there. Therapists should be aware that this may happen in therapy too, when one is dealing with early loss and deprivation. And if she wants to regain their trust and reestablish the bond with them, she will allow this only for a little while. Now, I'm adding that for a little while because it may be necessary. Again, my story is a little bit differently, but when you have a newborn, you're at their beck and call. When you're a parent, you're basically at their beck and call. And so you're dealing now with an adult which you were separated with, and while you still have to help them, they're an adult, and they have to understand as the adult version, beyond their inner child, that there are boundaries that need to be set. And I'm saying this from the adoptee to an adoptee, right? We have to understand that there are boundaries in place, and we need to accept that and honor those, right? Not everything is going to surround us, even in the best situations. People have work, people have other things going on in their lives. You may have other things going on in your life, work, a family. So I would say it is very important to set those boundaries and be like, hey, listen, I work from X time to X time. I know that seems really tough that you may need to reach out. Feel free to reach out, but just understand I may not respond right away. Because that could be. But setting boundaries is also very important. Okay, moving on. I say for a while because I don't think it is appropriate for either reunited birth mother or therapist to allow this severely regressed behavior for very long. We can take our cue from our other members of the animal kingdom, where one will notice that it is the mother who determines when a young bird will leave the nest or a lamb will stop suckling. She can then gradually let her child know that even though she is still available, they cannot expect her to be available 24 hours of a day. If she is acting like a mother, quote unquote, in the relationship and making strong suggestions to them about how they should be conducting their life, they still want her to stop mothering them, and will begin to see the advantage of not being so dependent on her availability, which will begin to feel like interference or engulfment. In both the reunion and therapeutic relationships, there will be a natural progression of or growing up process. After the initial regression, this has to be fostered by the parent figure in both cases. Fostered with encouragement, sensitivity, and firmness. Watch the mother bird teaching her fledglings to fly. That's what is happening. The birth mother has given her child back their wings and is teaching them to fly. Sometimes the adoptee begins the reunion relationship by being somewhat receptive to the birth mother, then cuts off the relationship, leaving her without a word for months at a time. As difficult as this is for her, she must accept this is as part of that what sorry. Then cuts off the relationship, leaving her without word for months at a time. As difficult as this is for her, she must that accept this as part of what her child has to go through. They may be feeling overwhelmed by their emotions and need to proceed very slowly, putting time and distance between them and their newfound mother. Or they may be testing her, just as they may or may not have previously tested the adoptive parents. No matter how rejected she feels and how much she believes that her child does not want anything to do with her, they do. She must be patient. She must keep sending those cards and letters, calling on holidays, and generally keeping in touch. As one insightful and sensitive birth mother put it, our children still need to hear from us, even if they don't respond. She has to be the mature one in the relationship, no matter how much she's also hurting, no matter how much her new internal abandoned child is crying out. Okay, so when I mentioned a little bit earlier about my own reunion with my birth mother, I got one card after the reunion. I haven't gotten calls. If I text first, she'll text back, usually within 24 hours, which is reasonable, right? I will just say I have an issue with communication because I don't want to go over the boundaries. But when she posts on social media, because she does have Facebook and I'm friends with her on there, it just seems like sometimes I feel forgotten again. And that to me hurts. So I don't often reach out unless I'm asking her a question, occasionally checking in. But I will say that it would be really, really nice and make me feel better if it were the opposite and she was reaching out to me. But I also understand that she has a lot of other things going on in her life. She has medical issues, and I do have a younger brother that she does take care of. He's not that much younger, but he's younger enough that, and there's other things that she needs to take care of. So I'm very understanding, but I also have huge communication problems, and I am very aware of those. So again, I will expand on my search and the reunification in my own personal story at another time, but those are just some glimpses into what I've gone through, at least with my own birth mother. Moving on, some birth mothers will say, "But why should I? I'm hurting too." It sounds as if you are putting all the responsibility of the relationship on me. And she's right. If she wants to let her own inner child run rampant to be running the show, then she can certainly do so. But if the long-term goal is a positive relationship with her child, then she needs to take on the responsibility of the relationship in its early stages. As with the newborn child, this newborn relationship has to be nurtured with unconditional love and intuitive sensitivity on her part. The results will be much more satisfactory than if she gives in to her own hurt inner child, where two unconscious, unhappy children would be trying to connect. It is impossible to build a positive relationship when both people are regressed. This doesn't work in the adoptive relationship, and it won't work in the reunion relationship. It is because of their regression that the birth mother, no matter how much she is feeling her own pain, must not burden the child with it, but must be there to listen, to acknowledge, and to comfort them. She can tell them her story, the history of their conception and birth and her feelings about it, but need not to go on and on about it. She need not to apologize every time she sees them for having left them all those years ago, nor tell them over and over again how much she regrets not having been able to nurture them all those years. This may make sense to the adult person that they are, but it will not register very much on the feeling level of the child. They now feel themselves to be in this relationship with her. This does not imply that the birth mother should put aside her feelings. For too many birth mothers, the need to ignore their feelings was what they heard over and over again, as it was explained to her how selfish it was for her to even think of keeping her baby. Her intrinsic, instinctive sense of not wanting to separate from the child was probably never validated and was instead ignored or vilified. Many of these women have never had any support for those feelings, which persist even unto today. So again, this book was written back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and so now it's 30 years later, right? This still happens today. It is very much a problem. The birth mother certainly needs an outlet for her pain. This outlet may be in the person of a therapist, friend, or support group rather than her child. Just as it is inappropriate for any of us as parents to emotionally overload our children with our pain as they are growing up, neither is it appropriate in the regressive relationship with the adult child to do so. If the birth mother does so, what may happen is that the adoptee may begin to feel that they must take care of her, the parentified child, with which many therapists are familiar. And once again, there's no one to take care of the child, no one to understand their pain. This will begin to close down again, and the relationship will begin to take on superficial overtones. On the adult level, they can certainly hear and understand the painful feelings they had in relinquishing them, but on another level, on that baby level, they really just don't care. No matter what, our inner selves, our inner children will not care, will not understand, because you're talking to a baby, right? Now, obviously, the outside is an adult or an older child, but that inner self, that inner child will not care. They will always feel a certain way, no matter how many answers you give. It will still hurt. Okay. Genetic sexual attraction. This brings us to the issue of sexual feelings between mother and child, which are very strong because they are primal. They may not be sexual in the same sense that they would be between two mature adults, but they are sensual and primal and are often confused with purely sexual sensations. Sensual sexual feelings are natural to the early experience of babies and their mothers. Both boys and girls will experience those feelings because babies are creatures of sensation in the normal and natural holding and touching, which follows birth. Sensual or sexual-like feelings are aroused in both mother and child. This is especially true in nursing mothers. When these feelings come up in the reunion experience, there is a real pull to act upon them, because it feels like the only way to get close enough the child isn't actually a baby and can't really be in a symbiotic relationship with their mother, nor can they go back to the womb. The next best thing seems to get inside them somehow, and the only way a man or what? Okay, this is weird. Very taboo, guys. Hold on. Uh, between a man and child knows how to is to blah, 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 knows how to do is through sexual intercourse. Unfortunately, some unboundaried mothers will allow this act to take place because in many cases she feels sexually attracted to the child too and wants to consummate that feeling. What? Ew. 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 The incest taboo. To engage in a sexual intercourse with their child is no more acceptable at this time, however, than it would have been when they were actually a child, or no more acceptable than a therapist having sexual relationships with a patient. It is a betrayal of trust. It is a sexual molestation. Sensual feelings and sexual impulses to satisfy them are natural and can be acknowledged, but they should not be acted upon. It is a boundary crossed, and it is always the parent figure who must take responsibility for setting safe limits. This is just gross. Yuck, don't do this, guys. Just don't. No matter how much the adoptee pleads with their mother, father, or therapist, no matter how much they pull for it, the sexual relationships between parent figures and children, regardless of age, should never happen. Just as in every case of incest, it will backfire someday, and all the work of processing the reunion may come apart at the seams. The incest taboo is part of almost every society and exists for a reason based more on psychology than biology. This is why any parent figure transgressing that boundary is a betrayal of trust, whether a biological relationship exists or not. Mothers and sons, fathers and daughters can surely hug one another, touch one another, hold one another, but it has to be safe. It is up to the parent to keep it that way. Sexual feelings also occur between mother and daughter. This is also natural. This does not mean that one has suddenly become a lesbian. It simply means that one is re experiencing those early wonderful sensual feelings one had at the beginning of life, before that untimely separation brought them to an abrupt and premature end. I do have a suspicion based on interviews with several lesbian adoptees that part of what they are searching for in their lesbian relationships is a closeness with the feminine that was the mother. Many of these relationships are more sensual and emotional than sexual, even though they are sometimes expressed sexually. This would be an interesting area for more study. Sexual feelings between biological siblings. Guys, don't do this. Please don't do this. This is all gross. Sexual feelings are not limited to those between mother and child or father and child. Sometimes, especially when a sister or half sister looks a great deal like the mother at the age when she gave birth to them, or if they look like him, a brother son, will feel almost an overwhelming attraction to them. The sister may also feel attracted to him, or may be scared by the intensity of his feelings towards her. This is equally true of relationships where the adoptee is a girl or a woman and the birth sibling a boy or a man. In either case, it is all right to have, feel, and talk about those feelings, but it is not all right to act upon them. In fact, everyone could get over the embarrassment of it. It would be healthy to talk about those feelings instead of acting as if they don't exist. Acting on them in covert ways, acknowledgement or unvoiced emotions have a great deal more power than those which are out in the open and discussed. Remember that those feelings are normal. As the relationship matures, the feelings will most probably become less intense and at some point resolve into more appropriate and manageable feelings of warmth and affection toward one another. Should the original intense and sexual feelings be acted upon, it would put a great deal of strain upon the relationship and may even cause it to end. In any case, sensual sexual feelings are natural between birth mothers and their children, both male and female, between fathers and daughters, and between siblings, because of the physical memory traces of infancy. In the regressive stage of the reunion, the most intense sexual feelings will be between mother and child. In all cases of sexual feeling, it is up to the parents to keep expressions of love and affection safe and boundaried, free from sexual acting out. Of course, if the parents do not do so, it will be up to the adoptee to, of course, if the parents do not do so, to keep the boundaries clear. Sorry, the adoptee has to keep it clear too. There does need to be a reconnection, a closeness among birth family members, but if it does not feel safe, the child will begin to distance themselves in the relationship with their birth family, and the opportunity of healing will be missed. Reunions as reconciliation. If reunions are going to be vehicles for reconciliation, the process must be understood and honored. Because of the emotionally charged climate in which these reunions take place, it is often difficult for anyone to respond responsibly to what is going on. As one birth mother pointed out to me, not only did my son go back to being an infant, but I found myself feeling as if I were 17 years old again. Confusion and vulnerability predominate as both mother and child communicate their histories and feelings and struggle to define their new relationship. During the early stage of the reunion, it is best if the adoptive parents can back off and give the fledgling relationship an opportunity to develop without the added burden of worrying about their feelings or their place in this new development. There will be a time to bring them into the process because they are a part of it, but the reunited pair need as much space as possible to go through the very difficult early regressive stage of their relationship and to experiment in which ways they can begin to relate as adults. Although it may be difficult for some adoptive parents to realize it, their own relationship with their shared child will be much stronger if they can do so. It would be unfair for them to threaten to withhold their love and acceptance as a means of creating distance between the birth mother and her child as a lever of admittance into the relationship at this time. The child needs permission to pursue this new relationship in whatever ways seem best, that they need unconditional love from everyone in order to do so effectively. Hard to reach adoptee. Sometimes a reunion which started off gloriously begins to deteriorate, yes, to the point of an almost non-existent relationship. Many birth mothers themselves feel hurt and feeling rejected, don't know what to do at this point. Because of their own feelings of rejection, there is a tendency to just want to forget it, to try to get on with life. She should not forget that she tried this once before. It might help her to know that many adoptive mothers were for years faced with the same feeling of rejection. If she can appreciate that these mothers hung in there despite the pain they were suffering, she can then begin to realize that she can do the same for her testing out child. Remember that whatever the child's chronological age, he's going to act somewhat childlike with her for some time. If both mothers have done what I recommended in the last chapter, which is to own their own feelings, They can give support to one another, which is to own their feelings. Hold on. They can give support to one another. This trying time in the reunion process. The adoptive mother who has suffered years of frustration in the bonding process with her adopted child can give comfort to what the birth mother is experiencing. If the adoptive mother had an easy time of it, then she can be happy that the adoptee waited until they met their biological mother to act out those feelings, which they had all along. In either case, the birth mother needs support at this time, and she also needs to not abandon her child. Although I recommend that at first the primary relationship be limited to the reunited pair without interference from either adoptive parents or birth families, in the case where the adoptee is testing the birth mother, she needs support from both family groups. Adoptive parents who were themselves tested by the adoptee can empathize with and encourage the birth mother, while the adoptee learns to trust the relationship. Of course, in cases where the adoptive parents are against the reunion and in fact interfere in the process, the birth mother will have to go elsewhere for support. But an added bonus to having the adoptive parents as supporters is that the adoptee will see that his relationship with the birth mother is not hurting them or affecting them, their feelings towards him. This can only strengthen the relationship with the adoptive parents as well as allow them to begin to trust the new relationship with the birth mother. Love breeds more love and closer ties to everyone, while suspicion and fear create an atmosphere of tension and animosity, benefiting no one. The reluctant birth mother. Sometimes the adoptee experiences a second rejection upon making contact with their birth mother. Nothing they say or does changes the mind of not wanting a relationship with them. Whether the birth mother is in a state of denial about her pain, or she has some fear about other members of family rejecting her if they found out her secret, being rejected again is devastating for the adoptee. It is almost impossible for the one who is ready for the reunion to do very much about one who isn't. Often the birth mother negates the importance of the birth bond and convinces herself that her child had a good upbringing and doesn't need her. This is rationalization. Her hesitancy is much more unconscious than that. She doesn't want to face her pain and has found an excuse not to do so. She needs to know, however, that her reluctance to relate to her adult child will affect them deeply. All the excruciating feelings of abandonment and loss, with accompanying physical symptoms of stomach pain, headaches, diarrhea, and so forth, resurface. The adoptee regresses whether she re-enters their life or not. I urge any birth mother reading this book to reconsider if she's disinclined for any reason to allow some kind of relationship with the child she surrendered. They need this connection to feel whole, and so does she. The impact of that separation has affected her life as well as his, and they both need to heal. She will experience pain, but no wound can heal unless it is opened up. Knowing that they are languishing for her today is going to affect her, even as she convinces herself that they don't really need her. They do. The birth mother fears that her other children will reject her if they find out about the adoptee. For one thing, they already know something has been amiss. This has been established that children are usually aware of secrets, even if they don't know what the secrets are. Secrets affect all members of the family, whether they can name them or not. It is best to get things out in the open. In almost every case I have known, Siblings have been very accepting of their brother or sister. In fact, most cases, in cases where the mother refuses to meet with the adoptee, siblings have established close, long lasting relationships. And although these relationships may help soften the blow of their mothers not wanting a relationship, the connection the adoptee wants most is that with the birth mother. Yet the adoptee has done everything in their power to get their birth mother to acknowledge them and relate to them in some way. They may want to contact their siblings instead. Yeah, I actually did that for my birth father, but yeah. This is their right, whether the birth mother wants it or not. They did not ask to be cut off from their genealogy, and they cannot be accepted to accept it. If the siblings are adults, it is up to them to decide whether or not they want to establish a relationship with them. The mother can't make that decision for them. These relationships, although not as powerful as that with the mother, can be very healing, and sometimes the rest of her children can convince the birth mother to change her mind without relating to the child she has relinquished. Tenacity, patience, and understanding in the reunion process. Reunions can indeed be a vital part of the healing process for all sides of the adoption triad. But for healing to take place, all must own their own feelings, as well as acknowledge and accept those of the others. No one can be left out, because each has been a part of the process. Each needs to stop projecting and passing judgment, and instead provide understanding and support for one another. There will be no understanding on the part of the general public or public officials unless this is first understanding and empathy within the triad. Even with mutual support, the reunion process is often misunderstood and can be difficult. It is a slow evolving process which needs to be understood at every stage of development. This takes patience, tenacity, and the cooperation of everyone involved, but especially that of the two mothers. At the beginning of the reunion process, when the adoptee is regressed in their relationship to the birth mother, it will be important for her to be sure that she acts in a mature and responsible manner towards them. This includes keeping the environment safe from inappropriate behavior as well as continuing the communication with them, even though they may not be responding to her. They may be having all kinds of ambivalent feelings which they are trying to sort out. Just as I recommended in the case of the adoptive mother, the birth mother will find it much more effective to validate and honor their feelings than to defend against them. They have a right to their feelings. They bringing them to her demonstrates their faith in her ability to hear them, which in itself should be healing for her as well. Because of this inequality in the relationship, however, she does not have the right to reciprocate until the child has or the adoptee has sufficiently matured in their relationship to her. This is difficult. I do not want her to think that she cannot express her feelings, but she needs to do so with someone other than the adoptee, for the adoptee's sake as well as for the sake of the relationship. None of the participants in this reunion can expect to eliminate the scar left by the relinquishment adoption process. They can, however, gain new attitudes towards their experiences, become vital and permanent aspects of one another's lives. This takes time. It takes patience. It takes understanding. And above all, it takes unselfishness. Unselfish, unconditional, and sacrificial love. So yeah, one of those things that, going into reunion, especially my first one, I thought it would completely eliminate or heal that scar of the adoption, and it doesn't. It doesn't. I need to talk more about my reunion, but I still have complex emotions towards it. Now, this is with my birth mother. With my birth father, I have yet to hear anything, but finding him and my two half siblings, which is another complex issue, I did reach out to my sister, and I have yet to hear anything. She is a half. But hopefully, one day, I don't expect anything, but we can only hope that maybe I can get some answers. Um, but yeah, it's something that's hard. It's hard to think about. Sometimes they don't even answer. And that's something that we have to come to terms with. Alright, guys, this is the end of the chapter. I hope you have a good night or a good day, and I will see you guys tomorrow.